What do you do when the man you buried walks into your life again, soaking wet, silent and alive? Tonight's story isn't about scandal or second chances. It's about silence, legacy, and the woman who didn't blink when the world's loudest man came back from the dead. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where love speaks in whispers and dignity always wins. If you've ever watched someone walk away from your peace, stay close. This one's for you. The rain came down in soft, steady taps, painting streaks across the wide windows of a quiet art studio tucked between two aging bookshops. Inside, the smell of paint, apples and old wood floated in the air. Bright color palettes littered every table. Children's voices rose and fell in excitement as they dipped brushes into tiny puddles of blue and green. Noelle Serin stood near the sink, carefully blotting a red stain off a little boy's sleeve. Her hair was twisted in a low knot, a beige cardigan hanging off her frame, and her sneakers were splattered with old paint. She had a presence, calm, focused, the kind that made kids feel safe without knowing why. Then the studio door creaked open. No bell, no sound, only wind and a shape in the doorway. Her hand froze mid-wipe. Her heart stopped next. There, soaked from the collar down, stood a man she hadn't seen in 3 years. A man the world had mourned. A man they buried. Kyle Durant. His face was thinner now, jaw sharp with exhaustion, beard unkempt. His coat dripped water onto the studio floor. But what startled her most was his silence. Kyle used to fill rooms, not with loudness, but with presence. That presence was gone now. "No," she whispered. "You're not." He said nothing, just stood there, then nodded. Slow, heavy, real. The children stared. "Break time," she said, too quickly. "Go grab some juice from the table." The kids scattered. She moved toward the side exit, motioned him to follow. He obeyed. They stepped into the alley behind the building. Cold rain soaked through her sleeves. She didn't care. "You're supposed to be dead," she said, voice sharp, heart pounding. "I know." She blinked. "You know, I watched the funeral." She didn't speak, couldn't. "I was behind a tree," he added. "No cameras, just me. You faked your death." He nodded again. "I had to." Lightning cracked faintly in the distance. She folded her arms, partly from the cold, mostly to stop herself from shaking. "You have 2 minutes." Kyle looked older, not in years, in spirit. His eyes were tired in ways no sleep could fix. "I came because I had nowhere else I wanted to go," he said. "And you were the only person who didn't try to find me. You think that's a compliment?" "No. I think it's the only honest thing left in my life." She narrowed her eyes. "So what do you want now?" "Nothing," he said. That startled her more than if he'd asked for a second chance. "I don't need anything," he added. "Not money, not a place to stay. I needed to see your face. That's it." She studied him, wet, empty, alive. "You're not the man I knew," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "He died too." That night, the penthouse was quiet as always. Kyle poured 2 glasses of wine but didn't hand her one. He just stared at it, fingers resting on the stem. "The board's concerned," he said. Noelle sat across the marble island, arms crossed. He continued, voice even. "They think your background will distract from the Brazil acquisition. They want a cleaner profile on paper." She stared at him, unreadable. "What do you think?" Kyle's silence was his answer. Noelle stood slowly. "That's what I thought." He didn't follow her to the door. He didn't say her name. He didn't ask her to stay. And that night, she walked out of his life. The silence stretched again. Kyle stepped back toward the street. "Take care of yourself," he said, almost whispering, and turned to leave. She didn't stop him, didn't chase, but her heart raced the way it hadn't in years. Because no matter how much she hated what he'd done, she knew the eyes looking at her just now weren't the eyes of a man pretending to love her. They were the eyes of someone who once did and forgot how to stop. She stood by the stove, hand resting on the kettle, steam rising but forgotten. She'd said nothing to her assistant. She finished her studio shift like nothing happened, laughed with the kids, cleaned the brushes. But now, alone in her small kitchen, she couldn't ignore the ache in her chest. He was alive, and she didn't know if that made her angry or terrified. The cafe sat on the corner of Cypress and Reed, a 5-minute walk from Noelle's apartment. It used to be a print shop, then a guitar store, and now it smelled like espresso and weathered wood. The barista behind the counter wore headphones and didn't bother to greet them when they walked in separately. Noelle arrived first. Kyle came in 3 minutes later. Neither said anything at first. He nodded. She nodded back. She pointed to the booth by the window, and they sat. No paparazzi, no reporters, no loud voices in the corner. The silence was tight at first. Kyle held a paper cup in both hands but didn't drink. Noelle stirred her tea even though nothing needed stirring. "I didn't think you'd text," he said. "I didn't think I would either." He nodded, eyes down. "But you did. I saw the painting." He smiled faintly. "That kid was brutally honest. Told me I was too tall to be trusted." Her lip twitched. "Why did you keep the canvas?" she asked. Kyle didn't answer right away. He stared out the window. "Because it was the only thing you left behind," he said finally. "The only thing of yours that looked like peace." Noelle looked down at her cup. Her fingers wrapped around the porcelain tighter than she realized. "Did you ever plan to come back?" "No," he said. "Not until I saw my name on a headstone and felt relief." That answer broke something in the air. She looked up. "You felt relief?" She repeated. "I spent so long trying to build a legacy I forgot how to live in a room without echoes," he said. "When the crash happened, I should have called for help. I didn't. I crawled out and hid in the woods until morning, and when the news said I died, I stayed gone." She stared at him. "That's not bravery." "I know," he replied. "It was cowardice." He finally took a sip of coffee, wincing, bitter, but it was also the first time in years I could hear myself think. Noelle studied his face. The Kyle she knew had always been polished, clean cut, perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect speech. This version had creases near his mouth, sunken cheeks, and a tiredness that didn't look rehearsed. "You still look like him," she said, "but I don't feel like him." "Good," she replied. "I didn't like him much by the end." That made him smile for real. "You're still painting," he said. "I never stopped." He nodded. "I imagined that imagining doesn't count." Kyle sat back. "No, it doesn't." The silence came again, but this time it wasn't heavy, more like unfinished. "Why did you really come here, Kyle?" He looked her in the eyes. "I came to start again." She tensed. "With me?" "No," he said. "With myself." She leaned back. "Good answer." He pulled something else from his coat, a folded piece of paper. She hesitated before taking it. A draft blueprint, hand-sketched. It looked like a warehouse layout. "What is this?" "A space I'm converting. Old docs. I'm turning it into an art space. For kids, teens, anyone who doesn't fit into the polished programs." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I spent my life building rooms only board members could enter. Now I want to build one for someone like you." Her expression didn't soften, but she held the paper longer than she needed to. No sponsors, no cameras, just people with color under their nails. She gave a slow nod. "If this is a performance," he cut in. "It's not." She met his gaze. "Then build it." Kyle exhaled like he hadn't realized he was holding breath. "I don't want credit," he said, "and I'm not trying to earn forgiveness." "You won't." "I know." They sat quietly after that. A bus rolled by. A couple laughed outside. Life moved without them. Eventually, she stood. "I have to prep for class." Kyle stood too. "Of course." She didn't offer a hug. He didn't ask for one. But as she walked away, she paused halfway to the door. "No more paintings in the mail," she said. He nodded. She left, and Kyle stood by the booth, looking out the window again. He didn't feel relief this time. He felt still. Back at her apartment, Noelle laid the sketch out on her kitchen counter. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't detailed, but it was real, just like him. She didn't know if she trusted him. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the one abandoned. She felt like the one watching someone return to life, quietly, without asking for permission. And she wasn't ready to forgive, but she was willing to witness. That night, she slept with the canvas leaned against her wall, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't dream about the night he left. She dreamt about the day he came back. If someone you loved once walked away from your peace, would you let them back in? Tell us in the comments. And if this story already has you hooked, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more love, loss, and lessons that last long after the credits roll. Don't forget to like, share, and invite someone who needs this today. 3 years earlier, Kyle Durant was a name you couldn't escape. His face covered business magazines, digital billboards, and panel events in every major city. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a movement, a myth. The man who closed 9-figure deals before lunch and walked out of boardrooms without a wrinkle on his suit. But the Kyle that sat alone in his penthouse one December night wasn't made of power. He was made of noise, phones buzzing, emails piling up, his father's voice echoing through the Bluetooth speaker, sharp and cold. You need to make the announcement. The Brazil acquisition will collapse if there's any sign of instability. Kyle stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the skyline. His tie hung loose around his neck. The wine in his glass hadn't moved in hours. She's not a threat, Kyle said quietly. She's not an asset either, his father snapped. She's a distraction. Her past, her lack of PR grooming, her refusal to participate. Do you want the board to lose confidence? She's not part of the company, but you are, and your image is part of the brand. Kyle closed his eyes. He had heard this line 100 times. Every time he and Noelle were seen together publicly, whispers followed. Why her? Why not someone more polished? More corporate? She doesn't need fixing, Kyle said under his breath. But she makes you look unfinished. The call ended without goodbye. Kyle didn't move for a long time. The door to his study creaked open. Noelle stepped inside quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. You left yours in the kitchen, she said. He turned, managed a tired smile. Thanks. She set both cups down and leaned against the table. How bad was it? Bad. She nodded, eyes scanning his face. Are they asking for space again? He hesitated, then nodded. Noelle exhaled. Her voice stayed calm, but her fingers clenched slightly. What do you want, Kyle? It was the question he had avoided for weeks. What did he want? The empire? The legacy? The seat next to his father's ghost? Or her? He didn't answer. That silence, longer than a heartbeat, shorter than a promise, told her everything. She nodded once, and placed her cup down without taking a sip. I won't beg you to choose, she said. I'm not asking you to, but you are, she said. Every time you stay silent, you're choosing. Kyle didn't respond. She turned, walked to the door, then paused. I don't need fixing either. He looked up. I know, he said, but he didn't move. She left. The elevator closed behind her with a soft ding. Kyle stood alone, 2 untouched cups of tea cooling behind him. The room was still, but he had never felt more noise in his life. Later that night, he stood on the balcony, watching the city shimmer beneath him. His name glowed on 2 of the towers downtown. Kyle Durant Investments, Durant Global Holdings. He looked at the lights, the skyline, the empire, and for the first time, he didn't feel proud. He felt empty. The next morning, he made a statement through his PR team. He agreed to a 6-month separation from all personal entanglements. The board approved the Brazil acquisition. Stock rose 2 points. Kyle Durant became a headline again, and Noelle disappeared from the press entirely, exactly as they wanted. The world moved fast in the weeks that followed Kyle's presumed death. News anchors speculated endlessly about his fortune, his hidden will, the frozen accounts. Some said it was suicide. Others whispered conspiracy. A few bloggers blamed enemies from a failed overseas deal. No one seemed to care that there was no body, just enough wreckage to satisfy the narrative. But Noelle didn't listen to any of it. She stopped watching TV. She deleted social media. She didn't want to participate in mourning someone the world didn't truly know. Because the man they were all crying over, the man who wore Tom Ford and shook hands with presidents, wasn't the man she'd shared silent breakfasts with. He wasn't the man who once sat cross-legged on her studio floor, drawing stick figures with her students just to make them laugh. The man she'd loved had disappeared long before that car hit the rail. What she missed wasn't Kyle Durant, CEO. What she missed was the version of him who looked at her like her silence was worth listening to. Still, she wasn't cold. She wasn't numb. She felt it. The absence. It crept into her apartment at night. It curled beside her as she made tea. It clung to her shoulder while she wiped glitter off a second grader's desk. It wasn't grief the way the world defined it. It was something quieter. A sadness without ceremony. And in that space, something shifted. She stopped waiting to feel whole again. Instead, she started creating a new version of herself, one who didn't belong to anyone else's image. Noelle took on more art therapy hours. She partnered with a women's shelter to run painting sessions once a month. She cut her hair shorter, began wearing brighter colors to class, not for a statement, but because color made the kids feel safer. Sometimes, she caught herself painting late into the night, eyes tired, shoulders sore, but hands steady. And every time she finished a canvas, she whispered one line in her head before signing it: "You still get to choose peace." It became her quiet mantra. She didn't talk to anyone about Kyle, not even her closest colleague, Jessa, who once asked gently, "You dated him, didn't you?" Before all this, Noelle had only smiled. It's over now. And it was. Until one Thursday morning, almost 18 months later, her class was interrupted. The school secretary entered her studio holding a clipboard. "Noelle, there's a package at the front desk for you. No return label." She wiped her hands clean and walked down the hall. It was a square parcel, medium-sized, lightweight, wrapped in brown craft paper and sealed neatly with a single strip of tape. Her name was written in handwriting she hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. She didn't open it at school. She waited until she got home. The package sat on her kitchen table for nearly an hour. She poured a glass of water, swept the floor, fed the cat, answered 3 emails. Then finally, she sat, tore open the edge carefully, and pulled out a painting, her own painting, the one she left in Kyle's penthouse. She remembered now. It had been leaning against the kitchen island the night she walked out. A small canvas, a dream made in soft oil colors, her fantasy studio with wide glass windows, and kids sitting on cushions surrounded by light and freedom. She had left it behind on purpose, not as a message, not as a gift. She had just stopped needing it. But he kept it, untouched, unaltered. On the back, in faint charcoal strokes, he had written only one thing: "You were always more than my name." She sat there in silence for a long time, long enough to watch the sunlight move across the floor, long enough for the ice in her glass to melt, long enough for everything she'd been burying to stretch its arms and wake up again. And at exactly midnight, she reached for her phone. She didn't overthink it. She typed one word: "Coffee?" She hit send before her heart could argue. Then she set her phone face down on the table. She didn't know what would come next. She wasn't sure what she was ready for. But somewhere in the quiet, somewhere between grief and possibility, she realized not every return was a mistake. Some were unfinished conversations, and maybe this one deserved to be finished. The coffee shop wasn't one Kyle had picked. It was tucked into the edge of an old brick building near the water. The kind of place with chipped tile floors, mismatched chairs, and a chalkboard menu written in uneven script. A bell jingled softly when the door opened. The air smelled like nutmeg, steamed milk, and something warm baking in the back. Noelle had discovered it her second week in Seattle, on a rainy Tuesday when she needed to be alone in a place with other people. She liked that the barista never asked her name. That morning, she sat by the window in a booth with peeling leather and a tiny lamp screwed into the wall. Kael arrived 5 minutes after her, alone, no coat, no umbrella, just him. He looked different, not just thinner, but lighter, like something had unwrapped from inside him. He slid into the booth across from her, his palms pressed together like he was trying to ground himself. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi." She took a sip from her cup. He didn't order anything. For a moment, the only sound between them was the hum of the fridge behind the counter and the quiet clink of someone stirring their drink a few tables away. "I didn't expect a message," he said, glancing at her. "I didn't expect to send one." His lips pulled into the faintest smile. "Still a tea person?" he asked. "Still not a fan of bitter coffee," she replied. He nodded, looking around. "This place suits you. You don't know me well enough to say that anymore." "You're right." Another silence, but not uncomfortable. He shifted, pulled a thin manila folder from his bag, and slid it across the table. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "But I wanted you to see something." She raised a brow. "I'm opening something. A foundation. For artists. Undiscovered ones. Kids who can't afford art school. Adults who were told their work wasn't marketable. People who still see in color." Noelle didn't touch the folder yet. "What made you decide this?" He looked out the window for a moment before answering. "You did." That caught her off guard. He didn't try to explain. He let the weight of the words settle. "I want it to be real," he added. "Not just a PR mask. Not another Durant initiative with my face in the center. What does real look like?" she asked. "No cameras, no press releases, no naming it after myself." Noelle opened the folder slowly. Inside were rough sketches, blueprints, scribbled budget estimates, and a list of proposed collaborators. Her eyes scanned quickly. Nothing corporate, no executives, just names of educators, grant writers, and local artists. It wasn't polished, but it was real. She closed the folder and looked up. "I'll be honest, Kael, I don't trust this. I wouldn't expect you to, but I believe you want it." He nodded. "That's something." A man walked past their table, carrying a tray. Kael shifted to let him by. When he turned back, his expression had softened. "I've made a lot of things happen by force," he said. "Board votes, land deals, acquisitions, but the things that mattered, the ones I lost, they slipped away because I never knew how to just show up and wait." He wasn't asking for her to believe in him. He was showing her he believed in something else. "I want to try differently this time," he said. She leaned back in the booth, fingers resting on the edge of the folder. "And if it fails, then I'll fail honest." Noelle looked out the window. Rain had started again, soft and steady. She thought of the kids in her class, smearing color across pages with no hesitation. Of the quiet girls who painted flowers that looked like hands. Of the boys who mixed every color until they got black, not because they didn't understand color, theory, but because they were angry and no one ever taught them how to say it out loud. "Start with the dock space," she said. Kyle blinked. "What?" "Near the East Pier. There's an old warehouse, good lighting, cheap rent, community access." A slow smile touched his face. "You already thought about this," he said. "Maybe," she replied. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. He looked at her like she'd just handed him the next piece of himself. And she realized something. She wasn't afraid of who he used to be anymore. She was curious about who he might become. The bell over the cafe door rang again. A couple entered, laughing, under a shared umbrella. The sound broke the moment, but neither of them looked away. Kyle tapped the folder gently. "Keep it." "I will." He stood. She didn't. But before he left, he paused beside the booth. "I'll make sure this one's built without noise." She nodded once, and he walked out. Not with power, but with purpose. And for the first time, Noelle didn't feel like she was watching a man try to impress her. She was watching a man finally trying to live with himself. Noelle kept the folder, not out of sentiment, but because something in her wanted to read it again when the cafe was quiet, when her thoughts weren't tangled in what-ifs and memories. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with the folder open beside a cup of herbal tea. Rain tapped lightly on the window, and the soft hum of an old jazz record filled the room. She flipped through the pages slowly. There were notes in Kyle's handwriting, messy, raw. It was a side of him she'd never seen on paper before. Plans for art supplies, outreach contacts, budget allocations that weren't grandiose or flashy. Simple numbers, carefully written. There was a page titled Phase 1. Listen. Beneath it, a list of questions. What does creative freedom mean to you? Who told you your art wouldn't matter? What does a safe space look like? She stared at that last one for a long time. Safe space. He had never known how to build one for her. But now, he was trying to build it for others, not to prove he'd changed, but maybe because he finally understood why it mattered. At the bottom of the list, scribbled almost like an afterthought, was a sentence. The loudest rooms in my life never gave me peace. I want this one to be silent and full. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. This wasn't the Kyle who had once stood beside investors, arms crossed, selling futures in steel and glass. This was someone else. Someone trying. She looked at the canvas on her wall, the one he'd returned in the package. It had always been more than a painting. It had been a vision, a dream of what she wanted to build with him, a future they never got to finish. Now, maybe, that dream would find its shape with or without him. At school the next day, one of her students, Elia, a quiet boy who usually refused to pick colors, held up his drawing. It was a building, big, messy lines, lots of windows. What is it? She asked. It's a place where people don't get yelled at. She knelt beside him. That sounds like a good place. He nodded. It's for kids, and grown-ups who get scared too. She felt something shift in her chest. She thought of the warehouse Kyle mentioned, the dock space, the big, open windows. She didn't believe in coincidences. That afternoon, she called the number scribbled on one of Kyle's pages, an old acquaintance from her art school days who now handled non-profit zoning permits. They talked. She asked questions, took notes. She didn't tell Kyle. She wasn't doing it for him. She was doing it because maybe the world needed more rooms where people didn't get yelled at. That night, she opened her sketchbook and drew the space from memory, the one Elia imagined. When she was done, she wrote something beneath it. If it doesn't exist, create it anyway. The next day, Kyle showed up at her studio. He didn't come inside. He stood outside the window, watching as the kids painted. She saw him, didn't wave, but she didn't turn away. During cleanup, one of the girls tugged on Noelle's sleeve. "Miss Noelle, who's that man always watching from the corner?" Noelle glanced at the window. He was gone now. "No one," she said gently. "Just someone learning how to be quiet." She went back to wiping down the tables, and inside her chest, something that had been stiff for a long time finally moved. Not in forgiveness, not in reunion, but in quiet recognition. Some people came back, not to stay, but to rebuild what they once destroyed, in others, if not themselves. Kyle wasn't asking to be let in. He was building a door for someone else, and that, she thought, might be the most honest thing he'd ever done. Kyle hadn't called. He hadn't messaged. He hadn't dropped another package, another letter, another folded blueprint wrapped in quiet guilt. And yet, he showed up. Once a week, at the edge of the school property, standing just far, enough not to be intrusive, but close enough to be noticed by her. He never stayed more than 15 minutes, never tried to speak to her. Sometimes he just stood in the rain with his hands in his pockets, watching the studio windows. Sometimes he brought coffee and left it on the bench near the garden gate, still hot when she found it, no note attached. Noelle said nothing, not to him, not to her staff, not even to herself. But inside, she felt the tension begin to shift, not in her throat or shoulders, but in the way she no longer expected an apology from him. She didn't need one. He was doing what people rarely did, showing up, not to be let back in, but to prove he could stand outside without making noise. One Friday morning, the sky was a soft grey. Mist hovered over the streets, and the air smelled like wet leaves and sidewalk chalk. Kyle didn't come that day. Instead, a plain white envelope appeared on her desk, slipped under her door. Inside was a printed flyer, nothing flashy, just clean text and a hand-drawn logo of a paintbrush breaking open a brick wall. The Harbour Studio Project, community art once not a luxury. She stared at it for a long time. On the back was a date, an open house, no donors, no sponsors, just kids, families, art, and below the details, one small handwritten line, built without noise. She folded it slowly, placed it into the front of her planner, and went back to teaching. That night, she didn't paint. She sat on her balcony wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping tea and thinking about names. Kyle Durant, the man the world once chased, the man who used to walk into rooms like he owned the air, the man who stood in silence now, letting others breathe first. She didn't trust it yet, but she didn't doubt the intention. And in a world where so many apologized without changing, that alone meant something. The following Wednesday, Kyle showed up again, but this time, he waited outside the gate until the kids left. Noelle was sweeping the floor when she noticed him. She didn't go to him. She left the broom, walked to the sink, rinsed her hands, and stood in the doorway with arms crossed. He gave a faint wave. She tilted her head. "I got the flyer. I hoped you would. I didn't say I'd come. I didn't expect you to." She stepped outside, not into the path, just far enough for her voice to reach. "What happens after the event?" Kyle glanced down. "If people show up, we apply for the city grant. If not, I start smaller." Noelle studied him. "Are you ready for people not to clap?" He looked up, calm. "Yes. And if no one cares? I'll still build it." She didn't smile, but she didn't walk back inside either. "That mural wall," she said after a pause. "It's too close to the west-facing light. You'll get glare all afternoon." Kyle nodded. "I'll move it." She walked back inside. And behind her, Kyle smiled to himself, not because she forgave him, but because she corrected him. That was something. The open house happened on a Sunday. Cloudy skies, cool breeze, the kind of spring day that couldn't decide whether to rain or stay dry. Noelle didn't confirm her attendance. She didn't reply to the reminder Kyle had sent through one of the volunteers. But at 2:07 p.m., she walked up to the edge of the converted dock warehouse, with her hands in her jacket pockets and her hair pulled back tight. The building still smelled faintly of sea salt and old wood, but it was alive now. Paintings lined the walls, work from kids and teens and seniors. Nothing curated, just honest, wild color. Tables were scattered with finger paints and ink blocks. One corner had clay sculptures, misshapen and wonderful. Music floated from an old stereo speaker sitting on a stack of crates. It wasn't polished, but it pulsed. Kyle saw her the moment she stepped in, but he didn't approach. He was at the far end of the room helping a 6-year-old hang up her painting with masking tape. Noelle walked slowly, taking everything in. Kids crouched on mats, laughing. A teenager sat in the corner, sketching a mother holding her child. A retired bus driver stood proudly beside his giant canvas of a forest that looked more like space than Earth. She could feel the difference already. There was no performance here, no velvet ropes, just breathing. A young woman with an oversized smock approached her. "You must be Noelle." She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned that people know who I am?" The woman smiled. He didn't say much. "Just that if you came, we should let you know the skylight in Studio Room B was inspired by something you once described." Noelle blinked. "Studio Room B?" The woman pointed toward the hallway. Noelle walked through slowly. The room was small, whitewashed, filled with morning light. On the floor were beanbags, blank canvases, and a small table stacked with old sketchbooks. But what caught her breath was the ceiling. A slanted skylight, not fancy but intentional. It faced northeast. She stepped under it and remembered. Years ago, she once told Kyle, "I want to build a space that catches the early light, the kind of light people wake up for." He hadn't said anything back then. He hadn't even looked up from his phone. But he remembered. She stood there for a moment too long, then turned and walked out. Kyle met her by the exit. He didn't smile. "I didn't expect you to walk the whole building." "I didn't. I noticed," he said gently. She looked up at him, steady. "You still building it in silence?" "That's the only way I know how now." She nodded once, then held out her hand. He blinked. "What's this?" "Blueprint corrections," she said. "You're going to need soundproof panels for the West Wing if you want it to double as a recording room." He took the paper she handed him. "You don't have to." "I know," she interrupted. A pause. "Kyle." "Yeah?" "Don't ruin this." He swallowed. "I won't." She left without looking back. And this time, he didn't feel the need to follow. Because she didn't walk away like she was closing a door. She walked like she trusted him not to shut it again. And that was everything. Kyle Durant was no longer a headline. The name that once trended across financial columns and business broadcasts had become a footnote in industry updates. A billionaire presumed dead, now quietly living in Seattle, avoiding cameras, building something no one expected. He didn't mind. For the first time in years, he didn't crave being seen. He craved presence. The kind that didn't ask for attention, only participation. The Harbor Studio project was growing, one quiet piece at a time. No sponsors yet. No press features. But every Saturday, people showed up. Teens with anxiety who hadn't left the house in weeks. Ex-cons who found their voice in charcoal. Mothers who used watercolors to say what words failed to express. There was no loud branding, no buzzwords, just color, texture, healing. Kyle didn't teach. He didn't lead. He swept floors, refilled brushes, fixed broken easels. And each time someone asked, "Aren't you?" he'd simply smile and say, "Not anymore." People stopped asking after a while. He had stopped being a name and started becoming a fixture. He wore the same jeans and navy jacket most days. He never stood on the central platform, never interrupted the art circles. He stayed useful, invisible in the best way. Noelle didn't come often, but when she did, she didn't come to observe him. She came to work. She helped a girl design her first sculpture using broken crayons and plaster. She sat with a boy who refused to paint anything but trees with fire on their branches. She offered corrections Kyle didn't ask for, but always implemented. And then she left. Every single time. But Kyle began to notice something. Each time she left, she stayed longer than before. 5 minutes more. Then 10. Then once, she sat on a bench by the exit for an entire hour, watching. The light changed through the skylight she never admitted she loved. He didn't speak to her then. He just let her be. Because love didn't always need to declare itself. Sometimes, it simply stood nearby and didn't interrupt. One Wednesday evening, Kyle arrived at the studio early. The place was empty. The lights off, the rain outside falling steady and slow. He unlocked the door and stepped into the stillness, breathing it in like a memory. On the main wall hung a new canvas, unfinished, edges rough, colors still wet. He walked closer. It was Noelle's. He knew it instantly. She never signed her pieces, but her strokes always gave her away. She painted emotion like it lived in muscle, not on canvas. The painting was of a window, light pouring in, and a silhouette sitting by it, head turned just enough to suggest listening. There was something tender in the brushwork, something unfinished, but deliberate. He stood in front of it for a long time, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and pinned it gently to the corner of the corkboard nearby. The note was simple. "You don't have to stay, But if you ever do, the light will still be yours. He didn't expect her to see it right away. He didn't expect anything. That was the difference now. He was building a life without expecting her to enter it. But every quiet step she took toward him, every correction, every glance toward the skylight, every painting left on the wall, it was enough, more than enough. Later that week, Kyle took a walk through the nearby garden plots a few blocks from the studio. Spring had just started brushing the corners of the city. Tiny buds clung to the bushes. Daffodils were beginning to peek out near the gate. The sky stayed pale, unsure whether to lean into blue or stay a comfortable grey. He stopped near a small bench facing the water, and there she was, Noelle, seated with her knees pulled up to her chest, arms folded over them, her hair loose. He hadn't followed her. He didn't know she'd be there, but somehow it didn't feel accidental. She looked up when she heard his steps, didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. He nodded. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged, still staring out over the water. "It's public." He sat. They stayed quiet for a while. Birds circled near the rocks. A couple walked past with a golden retriever. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing the violin badly, but with heart. Kyle took a deep breath. "I saw the painting." Noelle didn't reply. He waited. "I didn't touch it," he added. "Didn't even move the frame." She nodded slightly, still watching the waves. "I liked it," he said. "The light, the space. I didn't paint it for you. I know, but I didn't paint it to be ignored either." Kyle let that sit. "Why the note?" she asked, after a while. "I didn't want you to think I expected anything." She turned to him now, fully. "I think you expect something," she said calmly. "Even if you don't say it." He didn't deny it. "I expect to keep building what I promised." "That's it." She studied his face, the new quiet in it, the way his eyes didn't scan the room like they used to, searching for reactions. "You're different." "I hope so. But the part of me that was destroyed by who you used to be," she said slowly, "that part still doesn't forget." Kyle nodded. "I don't want you to forget." She blinked. "I want you to remember who I was," he said, "so you can decide if this version of me is worth knowing." Her jaw tensed. "Because if you ever trust me again," he continued, "it has to be by choice. Not because I'm standing quietly, not because I returned your painting, not because I wrote a nice line on a piece of paper." Noelle didn't answer. But she didn't stand either. She leaned back against the bench, stretched out her legs, and let the silence grow soft again. Kyle stayed beside her, not touching, not speaking, just breathing with her. They stayed like that until the violin stopped, the couple left, and the sky finally chose blue. Kyle didn't come to the studio that Saturday, not because he didn't want to, because he'd finally learned when to let silence do the work. The painting Noelle had left on the wall remained untouched. Students passed it, some pausing, some commenting softly on the colors. No one asked who painted it. Noelle hadn't signed it, and no one dared guess. But it began to draw others in. A woman in her 40s who'd never held a brush before stared at it for 20 minutes, then painted her own window with nothing outside of it, just black. An 8-year-old boy who hadn't spoken a word in class all week pointed to the silhouette and said, "She's listening to the sky." And one of the teens, Ellie, sketched the canvas from memory in her journal, then added a line. Beneath it in bold pencil strokes, "It's okay to look back if you're still walking forward." Noelle came to the studio later that day to pick up donated supplies. She saw Ellie's sketch left on a stool, and something inside her folded in half, not in pain, in recognition. Impact didn't always ask for permission. Sometimes it just showed up in echoes. That evening, Kyle sat alone on the rooftop of his apartment complex, a modest 3-story building near the port. He didn't own the place. He rented one unit. Small, clean, forgettable, perfect. He watched the skyline flicker under dusk. In the distance, the city hummed with life. But here, it was quiet. He'd left his phone on the table. Didn't check it. Didn't expect anything from it. He didn't know if Noelle would ever fully trust him again. He wasn't waiting for that. He just wanted to become someone worthy of trust, even if it wasn't hers. His life had always been about return on investment. This time, he was okay if the return never came. The next week, a surprise arrived. Noelle showed up at the studio during hours she didn't usually come. She brought her own brushes, her own palette, didn't speak to anyone, just found an empty corner and began to paint. Kyle arrived an hour later, spotted her from the door, and froze. She didn't look up. He didn't interrupt. He swept the entryway instead. For the next 3 hours, they coexisted in the same space. At one point, a child knocked over a cup of paint near her station. Kyle moved instinctively, rushing forward to help. Noelle was already there. She knelt, grabbed a towel, and calmly wiped the floor, murmuring to the child softly, "Accidents aren't the end." Kyle watched her, silent. She glanced up once, just once, and their eyes met. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. That was enough. After the class ended, Noelle stayed behind. She stood near the exit, arms crossed. Kyle approached, slow. "You painted all day," he said. "I had something to say. Did you say it?" She nodded. "I think so." He waited. Then she reached into her bag and handed him something. A notebook. Inside were lesson plans, outreach ideas, art therapy structures. She looked him square in the eyes. "I'm not signing on as your partner," she said. "But if this space is going to survive, it needs more than hope and good intentions." Kyle held the notebook like it was glass. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." A beat. Then she said, "Don't thank me. Just don't mess it up." He nodded, and she turned and walked out. But this time, she paused at the door. "You said the light would still be mine," she said, eyes soft but unreadable. "It always will be." She gave the slightest nod, then left, and Kyle stood alone with a gift that wasn't quite forgiveness, but maybe something even more sacred. Permission to try again, not with her, but with himself. Have you ever let someone close again? Not to start over, but to witness who they became? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this moment stirred something in you, like and share this video. And if you're ready to follow the quiet rebuilding of love, trust, and dignity, subscribe now to Mr. Charles Stories. Let's keep walking forward, even when the past is still watching. The air inside Studio Room B had changed. Noelle noticed it the moment she walked in. The skylight that once spilled quiet light across the floors now gleamed with purpose. Paintings filled the far wall, layered, imperfect, beautiful. There was life in the corners now, a rhythm, a story unfolding in color, brushstroke by brushstroke. But what caught her attention wasn't the work on the walls. It was the easel in the back, blank, clean canvas. Fresh set of brushes laid neatly beside it. A note stuck to the side, written in familiar handwriting. "For what you haven't said yet." She stared at it for a moment, then gently removed the note, folded it in half, and slid it into her coat pocket. The Harbor Studio project had become a living thing. It pulsed with new students. Older ones brought their cousins, siblings, friends. Teenagers who used to skip sessions were now arriving early just to talk. One of the volunteers set up a poetry wall. A retired mechanic donated lumber for frames. Local restaurants began dropping off food. No one asked them to. Kyle was everywhere and nowhere at once. He fixed a leaking faucet in the bathroom, rewired a broken ceiling fan, took a call in the back room with a zoning inspector, and came out smiling. He hadn't been this quiet in his entire adult life, but it wasn't the silence of retreat. It was the silence of someone finally in the right place. Noelle began coming twice a week now. She still didn't take a title, didn't put her name on anything, but she was there when a child cried because her painting was ripped. She stayed late to help rearrange the supply closet. She rewrote the curriculum Kyle had printed and left notes in the margins like, "Too formal. You're not teaching stock reports. Art is about questions, not answers." He read every one, applied all of them. One night, They found themselves in the studio alone. It wasn't planned. The lights were low, the doors locked. They had both stayed late, cleaning. No music, no background noise, just the sound of brushes being washed, supplies being sorted. Kyle broke the silence first. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" She didn't look at him. "No, I did." That surprised her. He set down the brushes, wiped his hands on a cloth, and leaned against the table. "I used to imagine this. Us. A space like this. But I thought I'd have to buy it, brand it, shape it into something the world couldn't ignore." He paused. "But now I realize the best things grow when you let them breathe." Noelle finally looked up. "You still sound like someone trying to pitch a vision." Kyle smiled. "Old habits." She walked over, stopped a few feet from him. "You've built something good here. I didn't do it alone." She tilted her head. "You let it exist without needing to control every part of it. That's what matters." He studied her face, the way her hair curled around her cheek, the paint smudge near her wrist, the softness in her voice that still held steel underneath. "You're the only person who ever made me want to be small," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I don't mean less," he added quickly. "I mean quiet, real, present." Noelle didn't answer right away. Then, "You broke me, Kyle." He nodded. "I know. And I still don't know if I've forgiven you. I'm not asking you to." She looked away. "But I see the man you're becoming, and he's not him." That did something to him. Something deep. He stepped back, gave her space. "You once told me you wanted peace more than promises," he said. "I couldn't give you either back then." She looked him in the eyes now. "And now? Now I'm not offering peace as a promise. I'm offering it as a place." She stood still for a beat, then walked over to the easel in the back, picked up a brush, and began to paint. She didn't speak as she painted. Kyle didn't ask what it was. Noelle moved in slow, deliberate strokes, deep blues along the edge, a sweep of grey near the center, yellow bleeding into green. Her eyes didn't lift once from the canvas, and her hands didn't hesitate. Kyle watched from a distance. He could have left. He could have stepped out, given her privacy. But something in the moment asked him to stay, not as a witness, not as a shadow of who he used to be, just present. It took her an hour to finish. When she stopped, she set the brush down gently, wiped her hands on a rag, still didn't look at him. Kyle finally stepped forward. The painting wasn't sharp, it wasn't clean, but it said everything. It was a shoreline, somewhere at dusk. A figure stood in the distance, facing the sea, shoulders slumped. Not in defeat, but surrender. The sky above the figure was open. Not stormy, not quiet, just open. Kyle stood beside her, hands in his pockets, taking it in. "It's beautiful," he said. She exhaled. "It's honest." He nodded. They stood side by side, both staring at it. "Is it me?" he asked quietly. Noelle didn't answer. "Or you?" he added. Still, no answer. "Maybe both," she finally said. "Maybe neither." He didn't press her. She reached for the corner of the canvas and scrawled something small with charcoal. "Breathe, even when no one's watching." Kyle's throat tightened. She set the charcoal down and turned to face him. Her eyes were clear, grounded, not full of nostalgia, not soft with longing, just steady. "I don't want to rewrite us," she said. "That chapter is closed." He nodded once. "I know, but I don't mind writing forward, without a title, without pressure." He breathed in, then out. "That's more than I hoped for." "I know," she said. He almost smiled. "Almost. I'm not offering love, Kyle," she said. "Not yet. I wouldn't dare ask for it," he replied. "But I'm offering room." He stilled. "Room?" he echoed. "To exist near me again. Not to fill space, not to prove anything, just be." That was what peace looked like. Not a reunion, not a redemption arc, but an agreement to breathe in the same air, side by side, without demanding more than the moment offered. She stepped back from the easel and began cleaning up. Kyle grabbed the rag she usually used for brushes and wordlessly began helping. They moved around each other easily, comfortable, capable. At one point, their fingers brushed while reaching for the same tube of paint. Neither pulled back. Neither looked down. Just a pause, a flicker of heat in the middle of all the calm. And then they moved on. Later, under the studio lights, Noelle packed her tote bag while Kyle wiped down the sinks. She turned toward him once, near the door. "You're not him anymore," she said softly. "But part of me will always remember the man who left." He set the rag down. "So will I. And maybe that's okay," she added. "I think it has to be." She walked to the door, paused again. "You coming?" He looked up, confused. "Where?" She shrugged. "Out. Somewhere quiet. No pressure, no promises." His eyes lit gently. "I'd like that." She held the door open for him. As they stepped into the Seattle night, mist hanging soft over the streets, Kyle didn't reach for her hand. And she didn't offer it. But they walked beside each other, at the same pace, breathing the same air. And for once, neither was chasing anything. They were just walking. The restaurant was small, tucked away on the edge of Queen Anne Hill, where the city noise dulled just enough to hear yourself think. It wasn't a place for reservations or dress codes. The tables were uneven, the light warm but dim, and a slow acoustic playlist hummed in the background. Noelle picked the spot. Kyle didn't ask why. He never did when it came to her anymore. They sat in the corner, across from each other, drinks untouched for several minutes. "I don't do this often," Noelle said, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. "Go out? Invite someone into a calm space I built after pain." Kyle nodded, eyes steady. "I won't shake it." She gave him a dry look. "You already have. A little." He didn't argue. "I meant what I said," she continued. "I'm not offering anything romantic. Not yet. Maybe never. I remember, you're not here to earn me back. I know. You're not waiting for me to change my mind. No." She tilted her head slightly. "Then why are you here?" Kyle leaned back, took a slow breath. "Because I didn't survive everything to become a man who only lives through guilt. I came because I respect the space you're giving me, and because being around you keeps me accountable." That answer didn't make her smile, but it settled something between them. Dinner came. Simple dishes, soba noodles, and vegetable curry. They ate without the pressure of small talk. The silence wasn't awkward, it was mutual. He asked about her studio curriculum revisions. She asked about the foundation's progress report. When the server cleared the plates, she leaned her elbows on the table. "Do you miss it?" He looked up. "What?" "Being important." He shook his head slowly. "No. I miss being respected, but I don't miss needing to be feared." She studied him for a moment. "That's an honest answer. It's the only kind I have left." Noelle sat back. "Good," she said, "because I won't tolerate anything else." He raised his glass slightly. "To brutal honesty?" She didn't clink hers against his. But she drank. They left the restaurant as the city lights flickered under the mist. Kyle walked her to her car, didn't ask to ride with her, didn't linger. He paused at the sidewalk. "Would it be strange if I said tonight was one of the best nights I've had in years?" "Yes," she replied, "but not for the reason you think." He smiled faintly. "Why, then?" "Because it didn't feel like you were performing." "I wasn't." "Exactly." She opened her car door. Before stepping in, she looked at him again. "I'm not inviting you into my life. I wouldn't dare ask. But I'm not locking the door either." He nodded. She got in, started the engine, drove away without looking back. But Kyle stood at the curb for a long while after, his hands in his pockets, the taste of something new on his tongue. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was real, and it was his to honor. They walked for nearly an hour. Noelle said little. Kyle didn't fill the silence. The path curved along the edge of the park, where benches faced the harbor and the occasional runner passed by with a nod. The sky had turned pale orange, soft with the light of a day that had nothing left to prove. They found a spot by the water, an old wooden bench under a tree just beginning to bloom. She sat first. Kyle waited a beat, then joined her. Noelle set her thermos between them. "It's ginger tea," he smiled. "You still drink that?" "It still works." Kyle picked it up, unscrewed the lid, poured half into the second cup she had pulled from her bag. "Prepared," he said. "I always am." He took a sip. The warmth caught him off guard. He had spent years bracing for cold. This was different. "I'm still learning to enjoy quiet," he said after a moment. "I noticed it used to make me nervous, like I had to fill it or I was failing somehow. You always filled it with the sound of movement, decisions, declarations." He looked at her. "You make that sound like a sin." She met his gaze. "Not a sin, a habit, one that cost you more than you understood at the time." Kyle nodded. "It did." Noelle looked back out at the water. "You said earlier that we're writing a new story." "Yes." "Are you writing it because you want a second chance, or because you want to know what peace tastes like?" Kyle didn't answer right away. "I think I used to want a second chance. With you. With us. The old version of me wanted it for the wrong reasons. Redemption, ego, maybe even guilt. But now..." He paused, letting the silence speak for him. "I just want to know that what I create from here forward isn't stained by who I was." She didn't respond. He continued, quieter now. "Being near you reminds me to slow down, to listen, not because I want something in return, but because I believe the new version of me deserves to hear the truth." Noelle's fingers tapped gently on the thermos lid. "There's a quote I read once," she said. "You can't unburn a house, but you can rebuild on the same foundation if the ground is still solid." Kyle looked at her. "Do you think our ground is?" "I think parts of it are, but the old foundation has cracks, deep ones. That can't be covered with words or new paint." He nodded slowly. She turned toward him now. "I'm not going to be the woman who forgets what it felt like to be left behind, to be silenced, to be viewed as a variable in someone else's equation. I don't expect you to forget. But," she added, "I might be the woman who decides to build a new wing beside the ruins. Something small, purposeful." He swallowed. "That's more than I deserve." "It's not about what you deserve," she said. "It's about what I choose." Kyle looked down at his hands. For so long, those hands had signed contracts, closed billion-dollar deals, crushed negotiations. Now they shook, just holding a paper cup of tea. "I never apologized the right way," he said softly. She tilted her head. "You apologized by shutting up. That's a start." He smiled. "You're still sharp, and you're still softer than you admit." Another pause passed. "Would you let me be part of it?" he asked carefully. "The new wing?" "Yes." Noelle leaned back slightly, her face unreadable. "I'd let you help carry bricks. I'd even let you help paint the inside. But not move in. Not yet." Kyle breathed out. "That's fair." She took the cup from his hand, refilled it, and handed it back. "Start with honesty," she said. "And patience. I can do that. Then show up. I have been. Keep doing it." She stood then, brushing off her pants. Kyle stood too, hands still wrapped around the cup. They walked back down the path, a little closer now. Not touching, not rushing. By the time they reached the sidewalk again, the streetlights had come on. He walked her to her car, just like before. She stopped near the door, hand on the handle. "One last thing," she said. He waited. "If you ever disappear again without a word, no crash, no lie, no staged tragedy, just vanish." "I won't," he said quickly, firm. "I'm serious." "So am I." She narrowed her eyes, searching his expression. Then she nodded once. "Good." She got in, closed the door, and drove off. Kyle stood there a while, staring at the back of the car until the taillights faded. He didn't feel like a man waiting for love to return. He felt like a man being offered a new language, one made of gestures, consistency, quiet. He could speak that language now, and every day he intended to get better at it. The next time Kyle showed up, he didn't bring flowers or a speech. He brought groceries. Noelle raised an eyebrow as she opened the door. This is either an apology or a bribe. Kyle held up the brown bag with both hands. Neither. You said you were tired last week, thought maybe you hadn't eaten properly today. Noelle stepped aside to let him in. I'm not saying no, but if you bought kale, you're banned. He grinned. No kale. Just things I remember you loved, and something new. She watched him unpack with mild amusement. He moved like he belonged, like the space didn't intimidate him anymore. She had repainted the kitchen in soft olive, replaced the cold grey with a warmth that reminded her of gardens and slow mornings. Kyle noticed. I like what you've done, he said, nodding at the walls. It reflects who I am now. He set down the last item, turning to face her. I'd like to know who that is. Noelle leaned against the counter. Then stop trying to impress and start learning how to be quiet in a room you don't own. He raised both hands. Fair. They cooked together. Not perfectly. Kyle dropped a spoon, burned one edge of the garlic bread, and almost added salt twice. But he listened. He laughed when she teased him. He asked about her work, about the non-profit she'd founded for women transitioning out of high-to-control relationships. It's called Unbound, she told him, stirring the sauce. We don't save women. We walk with them while they save themselves. Kyle was quiet for a long time. That's beautiful. It's hard, and worth it. They ate at the small table by the window, the spring light falling in through the glass. Noelle's cat curled up near their feet. The city hummed quietly beyond the walls. I don't want to rush this, Kyle said after they finished eating. Whatever this is becoming. Noelle watched him. Then don't. Let it breathe. He nodded. I will. Later, as he helped with dishes, she asked, Why now? Why did you come back when you did? Kyle dried the plate in his hands, slowly. Because the life I built after you was tall, shiny, and empty. I needed to leave it before it collapsed on top of me. And you thought I'd be here? No. I thought I might find a way to become someone worth being near. You were the risk I wasn't brave enough to take before. So I took it now, knowing I might be too late. Noelle didn't speak for a while. Then, softly, I'm glad you didn't knock with flowers. He smiled. I thought about it. Don't. She reached for another dish. Their hands touched, just briefly, but the silence afterward was full of something that hadn't been there before. Permission. They moved through the evening gently, like two people testing the strength of an invisible bridge, one step at a time. When Kyle left that night, he didn't ask to stay longer. He didn't reach for a kiss. He didn't hint or push. He only said, Thank you for dinner. Noelle answered, Thank you for the effort. Then she watched him walk back down the hall. He didn't turn to look, and she didn't need him to, because that night, for the first time in years, she felt something old in her body. Not longing, not hurt. Hope. It sat quietly next to the dishes, next to the cat, next to her tired feet. She let it stay. Kyle came back the following week. He didn't text, didn't schedule. He simply showed up with 2 coffees and stood at Noelle's door like it was a question. She opened it in a paint-stained sweatshirt, hair pulled up, no makeup, and the kind of peace that made her glow without trying. You were working, he said, holding up the coffees. I still am. She stepped aside. But I'm not cruel enough to turn down a cappuccino. He stepped in. I brought almond milk. She smirked. You remember. I try. Noelle had converted the second bedroom into a workspace. Canvases leaned against every wall. Some were half finished, others just sketched. A few sat complete, haunting in their softness. Kyle paused by one. You painted this? Yes. It looks like silence. She raised an eyebrow. Silence has a look. It does when you've lived without it. Kyle didn't walk around, didn't pick anything up. He stood still and looked with the kind of quiet that made her feel seen, not evaluated. She sat back at the easel and sipped her coffee. You can stay, but no talking. Kyle nodded. pulled up a chair, and opened a book. She glanced at the cover. Philosophy. Of course. For 2 hours, they said nothing. Just breath, pages turning, brush strokes landing. When her phone buzzed, Noelle sighed. She read the screen, then turned to Kyle. "I need a favor." He set the book down. "Say it." "One of the women from Unbound just got housing approval, but she needs help moving. No friends, no family. I was going to go, but the van's heavy, and I'm not in shape for lifting today. Give me the address." She hesitated. "You don't have to prove anything. I'm not. I want to do something that matters. Not for you, not even for her. For me." Noelle watched him a moment longer, then handed him the paper. "Be kind. Always." Kyle returned 4 hours later, slightly sweaty, but smiling. "She's settled," he said. "Strong woman. Likes lemon water and jazz. You talked." She let me carry the couch. Then she asked what a man in a tailored jacket was doing, sweating over a thrift mattress. I told her I was learning how to be human again. Noelle stared at him. "And what did she say?" She said, "Then sweat some more, baby. You're doing fine." Noelle burst out laughing, and Kyle grinned like a kid who'd passed his first test. That night, he stayed for dinner again. Noelle didn't ask. She just set 2 plates. And again, there were no big speeches. No old arguments dragged back to the surface. They ate. They watched a documentary. She kicked off her slippers. He folded her throw blanket. When she yawned and leaned back into the couch, he didn't move. He didn't take her fatigue as an invitation. He stayed in his corner, watching the screen, hands in his lap. She noticed, and she let herself fall asleep for a moment, only a moment, the way you do when you know you're not in danger. When she woke up, he was gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter. "You looked peaceful." "I didn't want to ruin that. Lock your doors. I'll see you when I see you." "Kay," she smiled. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Kyle didn't crowd her. He didn't chase or guilt or push. He invited her to a gallery opening. She said yes. They went separately. But when they walked in, and he offered his arm, she took it. Not because she owed him anything, because in that moment, she wanted to. The gallery belonged to one of Noelle's old mentors, a woman who greeted her with a hug and a surprised glance at Kyle. "Friend?" she asked. Kyle smiled. "A student." Noelle didn't correct him. That night, he didn't kiss her. But he did walk her to her apartment, lingered at the door, and looked at her like she held gravity. "You're not the same," he said. "I'd hope not. It's not just strength. It's peace. It's like your soul stopped apologizing." She swallowed. "It did." Kyle took a step back. "I'm not asking for anything. I know. But I want to say this anyway. I'm proud of you. Even if we don't become anything again, I'm proud I ever got to know you." Noelle's throat tightened. And still, she didn't cry. She only nodded and stepped inside, and smiled to herself as she closed the door. Because healing didn't always look like grand gestures or second chances. Sometimes, healing was standing still while someone else walked away, without you needing to chase. Sometimes healing was the power to choose your own quiet. It rained on the day Kyle's name came alive again. Not in a press release, not in a boardroom, but in a high school auditorium packed with too many folding chairs and cheap coffee at the back. Noelle hadn't planned to attend. Elior had invited her weeks ago, and she smiled, said she'd try. She meant it, but with no commitment. Then that morning, she got the text. From Elior, "Dad's speaking at the youth summit. You should come, you'd be proud. I'll save you a seat near the middle." It was short, direct. Elior had inherited her resistance to fluff. She stood in her closet for too long, unsure what to wear to watch the man she once loved speak to teenagers about impact and resilience. She chose grey slacks and a black turtleneck. Simple, clean, no makeup except a bit of balm. When she arrived, the student volunteers ushered her inside. Elior spotted her instantly and waved from the middle of the room. Kyle hadn't started speaking yet, but he stood behind the podium, arms folded, watching the room fill up. His eyes found her before she reached her seat. She didn't look away. He gave a quiet nod. Nothing more. She sat beside Elior. "You came," he whispered. "I said I might. That means yes in your language." She smiled faintly. "Depends on the day." Kyle stepped forward as the host finished the introductions. No fanfare. No corporate video. Just a man, a mic, and a truth he hadn't shared publicly before. "I once built an empire from silence," he began. "I was praised for it. Strategic, unshakable, calculated. But silence isn't always power. Sometimes silence is fear, and fear is cowardice dressed in control." The auditorium stilled. Noelle didn't blink. "I hurt people," Kyle said. "Not with fists, with distance. I made coldness look like intelligence. I made absence seem intentional. I was wrong. No one interrupted. I had to lose someone who loved me, someone who asked nothing but honesty, someone who didn't need my success, but wanted my heart. I had to lose her to understand that presence is louder than any speech, and love, real love, demands presence." Elior glanced sideways at Noelle. She kept her eyes forward. "My name won awards, got quoted, funded startups. But it meant nothing to the people I shut out. It meant even less to the woman who once whispered it at night and heard nothing back but silence." He paused. Let the quiet stretch. And then, softly, "So now I speak. Not as a CEO, not as a panelist, but as a man who chose the wrong room too many times. I speak because young men like me are taught to equate withdrawal with wisdom, and we need to teach them that courage is showing up, even when your hands are shaking." The room exhaled as he stepped down. He didn't wait for applause. He walked off stage and returned to his seat without looking back. But Noelle was already watching. And this time, she wasn't looking at the man she'd once begged to show up. She was watching the man who chose to show up without her asking. Later, during the closing moments, Elior asked, "Do you want to say hi?" Noelle shook her head. This was enough. Elior didn't press. But as they reached the exit, she turned once more. Kyle was speaking with a young boy, maybe 17, whose eyes were red but attentive. Kyle knelt slightly, not to patronize but to listen. She stepped outside and let the rain tap her shoulders. And for the first time in years, Kyle's name didn't make her ache. It made her soft, not with longing, not with regret, with peace. Because names only hold power when we give them weight. And hers was already full. Kyle didn't expect anything from that day. He hadn't invited media. He hadn't worn his tailored suit. He wore the watch Noelle had once given him, the one he left in a drawer for years. No cameras, no curated lines, just him and a truth he couldn't run from anymore. He stayed behind after the summit, not out of duty, but because a few of the students lingered. Some shook his hand. Others asked questions. One simply stood nearby, silent, waiting for the courage to say something. And then she appeared, Noelle. Again, not close, not coming toward him, but at the far end of the hallway, leaning slightly against the painted wall, arms crossed, watching. Kyle stopped mid-sentence as his eyes caught hers. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at him like someone who saw all of him, again, and was deciding whether to open the door or walk away. He finished answering the student's question, gently excused himself, and walked toward her. The hallway felt like years. His steps slow, measured. She didn't move. When he reached her, he stopped a few feet away. "You stayed," he said. "I didn't clap," she replied. "That's not why I looked for you." "I know." Silence again. Then she spoke. "You weren't performing." "No, you didn't mention me. I didn't need to." That made her eyes flicker. "You didn't need to," she echoed. "But you still showed up." Kyle nodded once. "I owed more than a public apology. I owed silence with presence. That's what I gave today. Is that what you're giving me now?" "Yes." "And tomorrow?" He exhaled. "If you let me. If not, then I'll still show up. For Elior. For anyone who needs me to listen without fixing." without dominating the room. Noelle tilted her head. "You've changed." "I hope so. Not because you were broken, but because you were afraid." "Yes, more quiet." Then she pushed off the wall. "I'm going to a gallery next weekend," she said casually. "New artist, minimalist space, no speeches, just colors." Kyle's pulse skipped. She turned, began walking away, then paused. "If you want to come, you can show up. No expectations." He didn't say anything. Not yet. She didn't wait for a promise. She disappeared around the corner. Kyle closed his eyes for a second. The hallway smelled of paint and floor polish, but something else lingered. Clarity. He wasn't forgiven. Not fully. But he had been seen. And being seen, truly seen, without performance, without armor, that was enough for now. Noelle didn't call Elliot to talk about the summit. She didn't post on social media. She didn't text Kyle either. But that weekend, when she walked into the minimalist gallery on 14th Street, she paused just beyond the door. Kyle was already there. He stood alone, hands behind his back, studying a massive canvas of indigo and cream. He didn't see her yet. She watched him for a moment. Not the tailored billionaire, not the man from press photos, but a man at rest. He turned, saw her, didn't rush, didn't smile too wide, just nodded. She walked over and stood beside him. They looked at the same painting in silence for nearly 3 minutes before either of them spoke. Then Noelle whispered, "You're early." Kyle's voice was steady. "I didn't want to be late. No more explanations, no more bargains." He didn't need to be let back in fully. He only needed to be allowed to stand beside her, and she let him. Not because she forgot, but because presence, not perfection, is the truest form of love. The morning of the ceremony came without chaos. There were no paparazzi outside, no whispered threats of scandal. Just light pouring in through tall windows, the smell of fresh eucalyptus, and a sense of quiet resolution. Noelle wore navy, not because it was a statement, but because it was simple. She tied her hair back loosely, not like she used to when she was Kyle's wife on magazine covers. No stylists, no heels higher than her comfort. Just her. Comfortable, rooted, done with pretending. Elliot tugged at his sleeves as she adjusted his collar. "Do I have to say something?" he asked. "No. You don't have to say anything, but what if I want to?" She met his eyes. "Then you say it with honesty, not performance." Elliot grinned. "So, not like Dad used to do, not like anyone used to do." He nodded, thoughtful. The ceremony was for a foundation. Kyle had started it quietly a year ago, not under his name, not even with press. It was about education, reform, and recovery programs for teenagers who had been through the system. The board chose to honor both Kyle and Noelle that day, not because of what they used to be, but because of what they now chose to do. As they arrived, the room stood. But Noelle didn't walk in beside Kyle. She walked in beside Elliot. Kyle stood already at the podium. He stepped back to allow her space. She didn't rush her words. "Years ago," she began, "I believed that if you loved someone hard enough, long enough, they'd become the person you needed them to be." She paused. "But love doesn't fix, and silence doesn't protect. I stood quiet when I should have asked hard questions. I accepted less when I should have left earlier, and I believed that endurance made me loyal. But endurance without boundaries, that's not loyalty. It's slow erasure." The room held its breath. "I don't share this for pity," she continued, voice steady. "I share it because young girls in this room, and even some grown women, are still mistaking struggle for strength. You don't have to burn to be seen." Elliot squeezed her hand. Kyle didn't move. When she was done, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was respectful, honoring. She stepped aside. Kyle came forward. No pomp, no dramatics. He simply said, "I hurt the person I should have protected. I tried to fix my guilt with grand gestures. But the truth is, redemption has no shortcuts. It's quiet, it's long, and most of it happens with no audience." He turned slightly, eyes meeting Noelle's just once. I don't stand here as a man redeemed. I stand here as a man willing to keep doing the work. That was it. Noelle didn't clap, but she didn't walk away. Later that evening, the three of them walked along the Riverwalk path behind the venue. The sky was soft with orange and violet, the kind of dusk that didn't ask for attention. Elior walked ahead. Noelle and Kyle followed at a distance. He kept his hands in his pockets. She walked with her arms crossed lightly. "You didn't have to say that," she said softly. "I did. I never want Elior to think he has to be loud to be heard." She stopped walking. So did he. "Kyle, yes? I'm not coming back." He didn't flinch. "I know. But I'm not cutting you out either." He nodded. "I know that too. I'm building a life with slower steps, less noise. And you don't fit into the center of that anymore." He let out a small breath. "Then I'll walk beside it." Quietly, she looked at him. Really looked. "You mean that?" "Yes." Noelle reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small rock. Elior's. The one that said "Forever Friend." She placed it in Kyle's palm. "You'll always be his father." Kyle's throat tightened. "And you'll always be the first person who taught me to leave." Her voice didn't carry blame, just truth. Then she turned and continued walking. Kyle stood for a long time before following. Not to catch up, just to stay within view. 3 weeks later, Noelle sat by her window, sunlight pouring across her living room floor like a soft ribbon. A new painting leaned half-finished on the easel. This one didn't have a subject yet. Just layered brushstrokes, deep teal, pale grey, streaks of ochre. A mix of stillness and becoming. She liked it that way. The kettle whistled. She poured tea into the ceramic mug Elior had painted in school. It was slightly chipped but perfect. Like her life. Like her healing. The door buzzed. Not the front entrance. Her studio door. She pressed the intercom. "It's just me," Kyle's voice said. "I brought the rest of Elior's books, and, something else." She buzzed him in, not with urgency but comfort. He didn't come in wearing a suit. He wore jeans, a plain navy sweater, no watch. When he stepped inside, he looked around, soaking in the calm. "I like it here," he said. "I do too." He held out the bag with Elior's books, then paused. "I brought this too." He held out a sealed envelope. Noelle took it carefully. "What's this?" "My final letter," he said. "I started writing it the night we split. I just never had the guts to give it to you. But after the ceremony, I finished it." She looked at the envelope, then at him. "Are you asking me to read it now?" "No," Kyle said. "I'm asking you to read it if you ever want to, or never. Either way, I needed to finish something without expecting anything back." That landed. The old Kyle would have demanded closure, begged for forgiveness, chased a redemption arc. This Kyle was leaving things open because he respected her space more than his need to be heard. She nodded once. "I'll put it with the others." Kyle half smiled. "They're ours. Not letters, but memories, wounds, lessons. They all live somewhere inside me." He exhaled slowly. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Noelle looked him in the eyes. "I already did." His chest rose sharply, like the breath he'd been holding all this time finally found release. "But forgiveness," she added, "doesn't mean I forget who I became without you, or that I'll go back." "I understand. I'm peaceful now," she said. "I see that," he said. She walked him to the door. Kyle paused before stepping out. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For letting my name stay alive in Elior's life." She gave the smallest smile. "You gave him your name. But I gave him his roots." That night, Noelle sat beside the easel again. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, written in Kyle's sharp, slanted handwriting. "If I ever made you feel invisible, I see you now. If I ever made you small, I honor your space now. And if I ever made you doubt your strength, just know, your leaving didn't break me. It built you." She folded the letter, set it in her drawer, then turned back to the canvas. She dipped her brush into bold crimson, not to cover the past, but to give the future its first stroke. And as the brush touched the canvas, she whispered to herself, "I didn't survive love. I outgrew it." Have you ever walked away? Not because you stopped loving someone, but because you finally started loving yourself. That's what Noelle did. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply left the door open long enough for the truth to walk through, and when it didn't, she chose peace. Sometimes the loudest power is in quiet decisions. She didn't burn Kyle's name. She didn't erase his presence. She let it exist, but no longer control her. And when he returned, he saw the woman he once knew, but could never own again. If you've ever been in that space between who you were and who you're becoming, this story was for you. So now I ask you, what part of this journey echoed your own? Have you ever forgiven someone without returning to them? What did this story remind you to reclaim? Tell me in the comments. And if you felt anything at all, don't keep this to yourself. Like, share, invite someone who's been holding on too long. And most importantly, subscribe to Mr. Charles' Stories. Because around here, we don't just tell stories. We remember who we are. We rebuild. We rise. Thank you for watching.